let's get started. So first off, we're here with Sarah Stewart. Sarah, you're actually not a million miles from us, are you? You're down in Ayrshire, am I right?
South West Scotland, Dumfries and Gallery.
Dumfries and Gallery, so just below that.
Right on the south coast.
Lovely.
Yeah, Wigtown.
Nice. So yeah, not a million miles away from us, but as many of our viewers and listeners will see, we're doing more of these via online because we've just got too much to get through to be taking a day out 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So to get into it, you've got your own gallery, but you're also a printmaker as well, aren't you?
Yes, yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about who you are and what you've all got going on before we go into the main conversation, which is the work you've been doing and the resources you've been building for pricing for makers and advice for pricing.
Yeah, so, I graduated, I studied at Edinburgh College of Art, graduated in 2007, took a bit of a break for a couple of years, got young kids, and we moved to Wigtown in 2013, so 10 years ago. I opened the gallery here, so I'm a printmaker, produce my own artwork alongside running the gallery, which is a bit of a juggling act. Normally, I would focus most of my time printing over the winter months, and do what I can when the gallery's open in the summer, but it's over the winter because we're a very seasonal business, depending on tourism quite a lot. I do have really quiet days in the winter to just actually get in the printing studio. So I do both those. I've also been the chair of Upland Arts Development, which is a regional arts organisation. They cover Spring Fling Open Studios, which is sort of Scotland's premier open studio event. It's been going for over 20 years now. So I chaired that for 4 years. They also do lots of projects with emerging artists and makers and lots of professional development as well. So I've got a sort of bit of variety with my hands in many pies in a way, doing a lot. And just really, my whole passion has been about emerging artists, really, and just seeing emerging artists developing and giving them really the skill set that they need to thrive, and to develop their business. Because I know that for myself, starting out, I didn't really have a lot. I graduated and then I was suddenly thrown in the deep end without the practical knowledge that I needed in how to run a business or
like many of us,
and get my work out there.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? You do like 4 years at university for anyone that went the university route, which is of course not the only route, but you do 4 years of university and you get maybe 6 weeks worth of classes, 1 day a week for how to run a business, usually by someone who's never run a business. It's never really the sort of the gears and the nuts and bolts of running a business, is it? It's never.
I think we did branding, like how to brand yourself. But like for me,
which was useful.
Yeah, but for me, I think like the books or like the financial aspects of actually running a business would just to have the sort of pre-knowledge of like what you need to do would be useful.
Oh man, it would have helped us massively, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Which especially now when more and more people are going their own route. More people seem to become, or at least what we are seeing, is more, and I'm very well aware there's a bit of observation bias, that's what we've done, so we'll see more of it. But that seems to be what everyone's doing. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be the way universities and colleges and stuff are gearing people towards. I always remember being told, there was a class of, 20, 25 of us, something like that, and always been told, there's like 3 product design jobs. We done product design in the UK, and I was like, all right, why have you got 20, 25 people here? Like, surely there has to be something else for us all to do. So yeah, that's a strange thing. That's a whole series of podcasts in itself. So with that, you've obviously had massive, talking again about the evidence and your exposure to certain things which has allowed you to create these resources in such in depth, but also your gallery and all the other things which we do want to talk about. do you think that's what's allowed you to put together all these resources? It's obviously what's motivated you, but being motivated to do something and having the experience and and you can't gain all that experience yourself. You have to gain some of it from speaking to other people. Is that what's allowed you to do this and for your resources to be reliable?
Yeah, most definitely, because I just feel like I've got this well-rounded perspective where I'm seeing things from two different angles. I'm seeing things, well, three angles as well. As a customer, I'm always buying artwork of other people, but, as an artist and maker myself, to be able to price my work, but also as a gallery and to understand the gallery's perspective and, to be able to view both of those angles in pricing, presentation of work, all sorts of different, different subjects really. But, I can see it from different perspectives, which not a lot of artists, I know there are other artists that run galleries as well, but it does give me greater understanding in the importance of getting pricing right. The importance of artists being confident in their pricing, and making sure that communication is clear between artist and gallery. Also, so that the gallery, understanding as well commission rates, because I think that's one of the things that artists really struggle with is commission rates and understanding why galleries take so much. And I know before I opened the gallery, I always felt, oh goodness, gallery's taken an awful chunk of my money, and I felt it was my money that someone's taken from me. But it's actually seeing that different angle and seeing how actually that needs to be fed into how artists price their work, so that artists are paid fairly even if someone's taken a big commission, and why they take that commission. So it's, it has given me more appreciation and understanding for that, but also something that I can then impart to other artists so that they know that, they are being paid fairly for their work, even if someone's taken a big chunk of the retail price.
Okay.
How much of that's a communication and transparency thing? Because ultimately the costs are the cost, right? Like the heating cost is a heating cost and the electricity cost is an electricity cost. Do you think a lot of that maybe bad will or bad feeling towards a lot of galleries is just a lack of communication?
I think it is. I think there's a lack of understanding in the running costs of having a gallery. And I know that when I first set up the gallery, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm making money off other people's work. I don't have a lot of upfront costs. So, I'll be making lots of money. But actually, having a bricks and mortar shop, especially now, but ever since, right over the past 10 years, there's so many running costs. You've got your rent rates, electricity, you've got insurance. I'm just running this as a single person operation, but other people have salaries, as soon as they've got more people. We've also got to, between exhibitions, you're refreshing the paint, you've got all your gallery set up, and then you've got your marketing and your online costs, so for every exhibition, every artist you have in, there are fees just to have their work in, because you're trying to market them and sell them, and you're not just marketing the work that you've got in, because you're promoting them as an artist, you're promoting their whole business, so you're representing them, and there are costs involved in doing that. So it is a big expense, and I mean our commission rates are on the low side. People should expect, I mean, most galleries take about 40% plus VAT. It can go as high as 60%. We're actually a wee bit lower, we're 35%. I feel I can justify that because I'm working on my own work at the same time. So I sort of feel like I'm trying to do things. If I wasn't producing my own work at the same time and feeling like some of my time is covered by other things I'm doing, then there's no way I could run at 35%. I would need to take more. So yeah.
What are the ones that people maybe don't think about? So it's easy to see rent, rates, electricity, insurance. I certainly didn't. Insurance wouldn't have jumped to my mind straight away. But what are the other major costs that people maybe wouldn't think about? Fighting the gallery's corner at this point.
Well, I think actually the costs between galleries and an artist are very similar. You know, with the admin and the marketing, reaching out to customers. Also, it's not so much a cost, but galleries have relationships with customers, you know, and they have a network of customers that actually, through going through a gallery, you're tapping in to their network, which actually, you know, which is giving you the opportunity to sell to someone that otherwise you wouldn't necessarily reach out to. You know, and it's you know, I was going to say a 24/7 job, but it's not. It's whatever hours, 9 to 5 job, doing it all day, every day. You know, I find in the gallery, you know, my attention split many different ways, but I could easily just drop absolutely everything else and just focus on the gallery and have enough work to keep me busy constantly. You know, there's always things to be done, but marketing is a big thing as well. You know, marketing is a huge expense. Getting work in magazines or online, producing posters. Some galleries produce books, sort of catalogues of people's work as well. So
marketing, galleries actually doing the marketing, which maybe isn't something that jumps to a lot of people's straight away. You know, the gallery being the main marketer.
Yeah, so so galleries really do spend a lot of money, invest a lot of money in marketing, whether that is marketing exhibitions or individual artists through magazines, online, also sort of print material, brochures, leaflets, posters. Quite a lot of galleries have been produce catalogues of artists' works for specific exhibitions, some online, some actual physical books, which is a big, huge upfront cost, with no guarantee that they're going to sell all these books, or it might take years to see any money back for them, or which I'm sure you're familiar with as well, you know, in creating your magazine, that it needs paid for up front, but that is a long term, you know, seeing that money coming back.
Oh yeah, Kate and I are 4 years into a 5-year plan that we knew for the first probably 8 years we wouldn't see any money back on it. And 4 years in, I can tell you that we were correct.
Yeah.
We still won't see any money back for it, probably for 8 years. Yeah. But that's life, that's what you do, isn't it? You go out there to create the brand. So tell me, when you're marketing from a gallery's perspective, what's your views with, certainly for makers that are putting stuff into galleries? Is it makers should be finding galleries that are aligned with them or doing exhibitions that suit them, or is that on the gallery to do stuff to suit the people that approach them? Where if you were putting your printmaker head hat on now, what would you be looking for in a gallery? And then the same question's going to come putting your gallery head on.
Yep. Well, I think if you're approaching a gallery, really you need to find a gallery where the quality of the work is very similar to your work. They're looking for the type of work that you produce. So, you know, if as a printmaker, I would straight away be looking at galleries that are happy selling original prints, that sell original prints. But in doing that, you want to find galleries that are selling. You don't want a gallery that's selling work that's exactly the same as yours, you know. So I do prints, vintage objects really in my prints. So, you know, I might look for a gallery that's also selling sort of contemporary prints. You know, mine are very contemporary, very sort of white space lots of white space around them. You know, they're not landscapes. So I might look for a gallery that's selling prints that aren't landscapes, but I don't want my work alongside other printmakers that are producing lots of vintage objects, because straight away they will be my direct competition. So you're sort of almost watering down what a gallery is showing. So there needs to be some sort of similarity in the quality of the work and the type of work, but you don't want someone whose work is, you don't want to be selling somewhere where other people are selling work that's really, really similar to yours.
Yeah.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And then as a gallery, are you reaching out to people, or are people reaching out to you? What's the criteria, and what does like a good application for a gallery look at? You know, if there's makers listening to this that want to be featured in a gallery, what does a good application towards a gallery look like, and what is a gallery looking for?
Yeah. I mean, quite often I'm always looking for new artists whose work I want to have, and I will be reaching out to artists I want to exhibit with us. I do have people approaching me. One thing I would always say is, do not take a portfolio of your work into a gallery. That is one things that all galleries will say is they don't want to see work coming in, for partly because the person in the gallery, their time is then diverted from selling the artist's work that they already have in. So they might have customers in and they should be spending their time talking to the customers, but instead they're distracted by someone else. And then, you know, so that's not fair on the artists whose work they already have in, if their attention
Right,
isn't
okay.
on
So
selling
that comes down to a time management thing, doesn't it? There just isn't enough hours in the day.
Yeah, and also it can make conversations very, very awkward. So if someone doesn't feel your work is the right fit, or doesn't like the quality of your work, you know, it can be very hard to say to someone nicely in that sort of professional setting, actually, I don't feel your work is the right fit. So I would always say that the best way is do your research, visit galleries, see if you feel the work is a fit. Then you can always say to the person when you're in there, you know, I'd love to exhibit with you. What is the best way? You know, am I better to email you? You know, do you have a certain, you know, the best way for me to approach you to exhibit my work? And then normally it would just be, most galleries would just say send an email, send a few sort of JPEG pictures of examples of work, or send a website address and a web link, and something where it's easy for them to just click on and instantly have an overview. And that's where your website is really important, to make sure your website is as up to date as possible, that you know, you've really got good quality photos of your work on your website, that is instantly clear the type of work that you're producing and what it is that you're selling. And it is, and if you are sending attachments, they don't want 100 different attachments. You know, they need good high resolution photographs. I'd say maximum half a dozen, and just a very short thing to introduce yourself and just say who you are, what it is that you do, where you're based, and maybe a little bit about your backgrounds. If you've got an art degree, tell them that. Quite often, I mean, there are galleries that look for artists that have a professional qualification, often as long as the artwork is good quality and they feel it will sell through their gallery, that's enough.
Where's your standpoint on that? Is that something you look for?
I don't go out my way to look for it. I look at the quality of the artwork, how it ties in with a certain exhibition I might be doing. Obviously, if an artist does have professional qualification, then I feel more confident in that artist. I do feel it is important to have that confidence that, but one of the main things is consistency, seeing consistency throughout the work and the quality of what they're producing. There's nothing nothing worse than feeling like you know what an artist is producing and, you know, the quality of their work, and then have them show up and their work is sort of nothing like the quality that you'd expected because it's been a rush job, you know, to produce work. And we have had that happen once, and been incredibly disappointed. So, but normally, you know from an artist and their experience if they have exhibited widely before, you know that they know what they're doing and they're going to produce what's expected.
It's a hard thing, isn't it? You mentioned the rush, like we're all trying to get so much done because there's so many different things we can do, especially in this space and especially in the internet space, and getting extra sales and opening extra sales channels like galleries, or like, you know, I was reading about TikTok shops this morning and all that jazz. We all feel like we should, I say we all, I certainly do, and I'm sure I won't be the only person speaking here or listening to this, that I just want to get it done.
Yeah.
And actually what you're explaining is probably the answer we all know if we all really ask ourselves the question, is I should really spend an extra day on this and make sure it's right. Because what's 24 hours in the grand scheme of things? Yeah. Versus, you know, I could get 3 applications to galleries out this week, or I could get 4 half-arsed ones. And I think the way we're all programmed at the minute, again, talking purely about myself, but I'm sure I'm not the only one, and if you're out there thinking the same, you're not alone, I would rather get 4 out there. Whereas, really, 3 good quality ones is the rate of getting accepted is going to be way, way, way higher, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. No, you are much better to do a really good job than sort of stretch yourself too thinly and doing a half-hearted job, you know, of everything. Because it is, you know, if you've got a quality application, you know, just it is going to be more noticed and it's more likely to get picked up, is the bottom line. So yeah, it is always, and a big part of that is time management, you know, and making sure that you are managing your time well. But I would always say have a website, you know, even if it's, you know, if you've not got a website, make sure you've at least got a landing page, you know, which is a good quality landing page. You know, that is a website is one of the most important things to make sure you have, and have a good quality one, you know. And there are lots of ways, lots of different hosts, you know, where they provide templates, you know, like Wix and Squarespace, Shopify, and it is really easy to put together a website and just drop your images in, you know. It doesn't have to be fancy in any way, just basic is fine, but focus on the quality of your photographs.
Do you know one of the biggest hacks I've found for that, for me, for my engineering company? Landing page, like you say, minimal time input, maximal effect, because as an engineer, all my projects are you need to speak to me to discuss it further. So it's like, here's the page, here's the contact information, and I used Fiverr. Sent a guy on Fiverr a bunch of images of work that we'd done and a bunch of videos of tests that we'd done on all the work for film, and it was like 35 quid, and he put together a sweet showreel. It was great. Yeah. Guy on Fiverr, like 35 quid, or you can get like premium ones at 100 quid or something like that. And you know, for the investment of, what is it, 6 or 8 quid a month, plus a day to set it up. And that is the only thing my engineering company has. Most of engineering work is word of mouth, so it kind of operates a bit differently. But with regards to like showreels and setting up good websites, there's so many good services for it now.
It's never been easier to set up your own website. I do think a website is super important. Whenever like we try and find makers, if they don't have a website, it's so hard to find anything about them and like, you know, how they got into it, and you just to find a little bit of background and even see examples of the work. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's also something to get on the website train now. Talking from Kate and I's experience, mainly from Kate's experience of curating makers for the book. You might find this curating makers for galleries as well. There is a lot of people at the moment posing as makers, certainly internationally, and on Instagram. The maker space is obviously seen as very lucrative from some people. I can think of a couple of knife makers, open close quotation marks, that are definitely bought and sold knives, because I've done the research and I've found where they come from. And the Instagram page looks great, but showing a website that's got contact links that you can speak to someone, it just takes it from this is this internet thing to this is this real life thing that someone's actually behind.
Yeah. No, definitely, because I've come across stories. I've never sort of come across it myself personally, but I have, seen stories where, someone's images of their artwork have been put on someone else's website and they're selling this maker's work, but it's actually a poorly produced copy of someone else's.
Yeah, that sucks, doesn't it? That really sucks. That's even a thing. But it can't be avoided. So I'm applying to you now. I'm going to apply to you for a gallery. I'm going to say, I want to put my flux capacitors that I've been working on into your gallery. What, you say like that short sort of blurb, what should all be included in that? Obviously you've said your art degree and stuff, but what would that look like? If you're now mentoring someone to apply for a gallery, what would you be expecting to be in that?
So really, I need to know a bit about their background as an artist. So I don't need to know, it's the same with a CV. I don't need to know, that they worked in McDonald's. That doesn't interest me at all. I need to know their journey as an artist. How many years have they been doing this? Their experience. So, I don't need to necessarily know if they've done lots of exhibitions in lots of galleries. I don't need to know all that. You can just say, whether you've exhibited internationally or not, whether you've done solo exhibitions or group shows, how many years you've been exhibiting. If you have had your work in a couple of high profile galleries, do mention that. You're selling yourself and you're selling the quality of your work. It just needs to be very basic. What's your background? Are you self-taught? Do you have a degree? What level have you been trained to? And how many years have you been doing this? It's good to know how much experience someone has had, and don't let that put you off if you're an emerging artist, because galleries do like to support emerging artists too. So if you're emerging, that doesn't necessarily mean no one's going to touch you. It's just good to know what to expect, because also that relationship between the person curating the exhibition, whoever's working in the gallery, and the artist needs to know how much guidance they might need, in submitting work. Do I need to actually send an artist more information? This is, to explain this is what I'm looking for. If you need help, approach me. Or is it just a case of, how much guidance are they going to need, so that I know that I'm helping them in the best way that they can. So that is really important to know.
That makes a lot of sense, though. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Ultimately, there'll be people that are applying for galleries every day that'll just breeze through. But they're, as you say, emerging artists. It may be the first gallery they've ever applied for. And, if the gallery can help them, then why not take it as experience? There's no point in you sort of back and forward and trudging through the muddy waters to try and get this gallery or get this maker over the line with your gallery. Whereas if a maker's very upfront and, hey, this is my first time, then what gumph you can cut out, really.
Yeah, well, I think as well, it's important just to keep communication channels open, and galleries need to make sure that artists know what they're doing. And if they don't know what they're doing, it is important that they can raise a hand and say, can you just help me here? Or can you just tell me exactly what you're looking for? And that's just going to help them in future as well. But it's also going to mean that nothing's going to get left out, or, you know, that if someone approaching me isn't sure how to price their work, they might be giving me pricing, but, you know, I need to know, are they giving me the price that I'm expecting to sell their work for, or are they giving me the price that I'm expecting to pay them? You know, they're expecting me to pay them for that work. So, you know, things like that, it's making sure that the communication is there and the clarity is there so that there is no confusion, and it's looking out for the interests of both the gallery and the artist.
Makes a lot of sense. So do you feel the position of your gallery, and then same question for most galleries, is to build long-standing relationships with makers? Or do you find that a lot of galleries, or maybe your gallery, there's more impact in sort of, I don't mean it in a negative connotation, but one and done. Like, is there more impact in you just having like, I've got this person for this week or this month or this thing, this event, and then they'll never be on again? Like, get it while you can. Or is there more impact for you to build constant rapport with gallery customers and with makers?
Yeah. Well, we do a bit of both. So we do try to have solo exhibitions. Since lockdown, we're actually renovating part of our space at the moment, so we're a bit limited to what we're doing. But you know, once the renovations are complete, we'll be going back to. We will have some solo exhibitions, you know, which are running over every couple of months, and those artists might exhibit with us again, they might not, but we also have some artists that we have in all the time. So we will always have, in one of the rooms, we will always have their work in the walls. We will always have their prints and browsers, you know, and they're with us all the time. And we've got a really long-standing relationship with them. And that they know that they've got that consistency with our support. And also we know that we've got work that our customers love, and that, you know, we can show our customers the development of that artist's work, you know, and that maker's work, you know, and yeah. So we do. We've got a ceramicist, we've got 3 or 4 printmakers, and we've got someone producing original paintings that we have in all the time, and then we've got other work is just rotational. So some of those artists we will ask to come back again and again, but you know, it is that spread. It's having something fresh so that people coming in the door are always seeing something new as well.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask one more question, hopefully just one more question about galleries, and then I want to move on to your pricing resources and where pricing should be for makers. With a gallery, right, as makers and as independents and as entrepreneurs, whatever word you want to sort of ring fence what we all do as, where do you see galleries in that timeline? You know, as a gallery, it doesn't feel like a gallery should be one of the first things you're approaching. Where, at what stage for a maker should they be thinking about galleries? At what stage as a gallery are you expecting makers to be at before they approach you? Where do you feel makers' time is best spent? Early days, medium days, late days?
I think really one of the important things is just, if you're starting out, get your work out there. Just get it out, you know, online, through Instagram, you know, just see how it sells, see how it's received, and allow that to feed into your development. So, you know, as you work and as you create and as you develop your work and receive feedback, you know, you're developing your work. And I would say don't hold back from approaching people. I think as well, though, it's important to know the quality of the galleries that you're having your work in. You know, there are some galleries that I aspire, you know, I've been doing this for 15 years, you know, but there are some galleries that I would aspire to have my work in at some point in the future, but I know I'm not quite there yet. You know, my work isn't quite what they're looking for, but it will be. But then there are other galleries that I would quite happily just approach. I've just had work accepted into the Bankside Gallery in London as part of their open exhibitions, and that is actually one way of getting your work in spaces, is applying for open exhibitions, and that is a good way of testing your work and testing how your work's perceived, and whether your work is to the quality and standard that galleries are looking for, without worrying, because open exhibitions, it is all based on photographs of your work. You're not selling yourself, you're not having to sell your brand, you're just selling your product. Just sell online. I think it's important to be able to sell your work through different places, and it really depends the type of work you're selling, how it's priced, and the customer that you're looking for. But it's good to be able to get a balance between selling online and selling in person, and whether that's doing open studios to sell in person, or craft fairs and markets as in-person ways of selling. Your own website is a great way of selling. If you can link that to Instagram, straight away that's you reaching your audience. And then there's all sorts of different online platforms. If you're starting out, Etsy's always, well, it used to be a fairly good way to go. I know they've upped their fees and there's been a lot of problems with makers, but it really depends how your work's priced. Etsy, people tend to just be looking at impulse purchases and not, whereas you've got places like Not on the High Street and Art Finder, Saatchi Art, Folksy, these things, these platforms, you can really sell work that's sort of that higher priced, or that bit more, if you're more experienced, it's easier, they're probably better platforms to be looking at.
Nice.
Sounds good. Sounds a good. Do you want to cover anything more galleries before we segue into pricing? Because you started to mention pricing there, so it felt like a good chance to move over to that.
I don't think there's a lot. I think one of the things that I will say is, when you approach a gallery, though, always, that is one of the things to really be confident in, is your pricing, and to know what your pricing structure is before you approach them. And also to have your pricing written down is always a good thing. So to be confident in that, and to have that in writing, and even for selling to wholesale. So yeah, just
okay. Sounds good.
And I think that's it really on galleries.
Wicked. So moving into pricing. So tell me, so we obviously put out the call, we want to speak to people that can offer something to the makers as well, and not only have you offered a massive leg up and chunk of data and guidance on galleries there, but the real reason we spoke, or the original reason we spoke, I should say, was you done a lot of resources based on pricing, and that came primarily from all the mentorship stuff you were doing, if I believe rightly.
Well,
so could you talk us through that?
Both. It was a bit of mentoring. It was also, I'm in lots of printmaking groups and things online on Facebook that I've been in for years, and I recognised it was the same questions coming up again and again in these groups, was, how do I price my work? And I realised that actually when I was at art college, I was never told how to price, and it was sort of one of these things that in the early days you fumble your way through and just hope that you're getting it right, but, it's one of these things that I think, and I hope I'm getting it right now, but, with the knowledge that I've gathered, over the years, it is just being able to share that to people that have never had anyone give them any indication of how to price their work is sort of one of the most beneficial things, because if they underprice their work, they're not covering their time costs and their overheads. There's no way they can make a living if you're not pricing your work right.
It's also very hard to go up the way. If people have seen your price at certain and then you realise you've mispriced and start putting your prices up, that seems to be very difficult to do.
I think it's very hard to suddenly jump up with your pricing. It is good to gradually put your prices up. If you're gradually putting your prices up, you're giving the customer confidence in what they've bought, that actually your work is going up in value, especially if it's original artwork. To see that artwork go up in value, someone's going to think, wow, actually I'm glad I've invested in this. It is an investment. If you suddenly jump up in price, that's not so good. But the one thing that I will say is, do not decrease your pricing. And that's one of the things, because if you're decreasing your value, decreasing your pricing, you're sort of devaluing your work, and people don't want to see your prices come down. And that's one of the things as well. I see a lot of people offering discounts on their work. And I would say, if you offer discounts, don't do it too often, because otherwise people will not buy your work because they'll be waiting for you to discount it. So they're not necessarily giving you the price that you need. So you can offer a discount, but be very careful how often you do it. So yeah. Sorry, I'm forgetting how that.
So we're talking about your resources. Well, we're talking about that originally, but really what we want to talk about is your resources. And I want you just to talk me through all of that. First off, and we'll cover this again at the end, they are all available on your website, and we'll direct people to that in the show notes. But your resources here has a lot of information on it with regards to consistent pricing, wholesale versus resale, your SRTM, your salary, running costs, time and material costs. And I want you just to kind of talk us through that nuts and bolts to finished object. What makers, certainly makers listening to this, maybe you're a start-out maker, maybe you've been doing it for a while, what your views, feelings and research has led you to with regards to these resources for pricing.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with that first point that you said about consistency. Is it is important that your pricing is consistent wherever you're selling your work. And I know that some artists are tempted to sell their work cheaper than they might in a gallery. But it's important you're selling consistently, especially, with craft and original prints, where you're selling multiples of the same type of work. That from a customer's point of view, they don't want to be buying something and then seeing it cheaper somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you've got that price consistently. For galleries, they don't want to be trying to sell your work and then finding it cheaper on your website, because then it makes them look like they're overpriced, and then they start losing their customer support. So it's just really important. It doesn't matter whether you're selling yourself directly, whether you're selling through a gallery, whether you're selling online in your studio, wherever you're selling, make sure your pricing is consistent and stays the same across the board. If you find that you start to exhibit somewhere that's very high end, you could find and they're expecting you to price your work a lot higher. Look at ways of developing your product to suit that market. Whether if you're a ceramicist, for example, is there a way that you're changing the scale of the piece or the glazes you're using or something to make a different collection of your work, in a sense?
So a gallery specific collection.
So a specific collection that's priced differently. But if it is exactly the same type of work, it should be consistent across the board. So, and then what you really need to look at, you need to be aware of your audience. and who's buying your work. You know, if you're selling through Etsy, their fees are relatively low. If you're selling through your website, you've just got your website fees. No one's taken a commission. You know, you might have credit card fees, but that's about it. Shops and cafes would normally have really low commission rates, maybe 20%. You've then also got galleries which take a higher commission rate. So you've got this whole spectrum of different places you can sell your work, but it doesn't matter which of these you're selling your work through, your pricing really needs to stay the same. But all that means is that when you're selling through a gallery, you're obviously making less money yourself than if you're selling on your own website, for example. So you've then got that sort of commission rate in the middle, that sort of percentage or the overheads, you know, that difference in the pricing, that when you sell it yourself, you're making more. And so I view that as being sort of a selling bonus in a way. So I work out a wholesale price, which is the minimum price that I need to sell my work for. And that's what you always need to start with, is the absolute minimum you need to cover your costs creating your work. And what you need to include in that, you need to include all your material costs, which is the one that everyone remembers. You've then got your time costs, and I would always try and work that out at an hourly rate. Obviously I know this podcast is sort of sent to people all around the world. In Scotland, we have the Scottish Artists Union that has a sort of recommended rates of pay for artists on their website. And I'm sure different countries might have different artists unions, or someone recommending this is how much you should be expected to be paid per hour. And I would use that to work out your sort of, this is my time and my material costs. And so you've got sort of your hourly rate. You also need to include as well all your sort of other expenses. So everyone will have, it might be studio rent space, electricity, website costs, insurances, your admin time is a big thing. And these are all things that you can't just pass on to the customer easily. So you need to include those when you're pricing your work, if that makes sense. So what I would normally do is I would normally break that down into an hourly rate. So the easiest way to do it is to look at the costs over the whole course of a year and just say, well, you know, because with insurance and things, that's normally an annual rate. You know, your electricity, you can normally work out annually roughly how much that costs, you know, and you would work these all out and then divide that down. So an annual rate, divide that down into an hourly rate. And I would put, so you have, sorry, I'm trying to remember this. So you've got your hourly rate, which would be how much you are paid per hour.
Mm-hmm. And that's the one where we can find a lot of resources on that on, well, the Scottish Artists Union or any other relevant artist union.
So I think on the Scottish Artists Union, the last time I looked at it, I think because of the experience, the number of years experience I've got, that they recommend I get paid £36 an hour. So I would have that as my £36 an hour sort of hourly rate. And I would add to that my running costs, which is also an hourly rate. So I could say, right, all my electricity bills and everything else, all my insurance, my website fees, that works out at £2.50 per hour, for example. And I would add those two together. So those are both my 2 hourly rates added together. And then I would multiply that by the time it takes for me to create that piece of work.
Yep, which is on your page here. It's time, open bracket, S plus R, yep.
Yep. So if my piece of work took, we'll just say it took 10 hours, okay, and I've got my my salary and my running costs together, and then I would multiply that by my time. So I multiply that by 10 because that's how long it took me to produce the work, for example. And then I would add on my material costs. And then that should be your absolute minimum of what you need to make, because that will cover all your running costs, that will cover your materials, and that will cover all the time that's gone into creating it.
It's a really nice, simple way to look at it, isn't it? Because it is just like, I've got your resources up on the screen here. It is literally, an algebraic formula without putting anybody off looking at it. I know algebra's, famed for being awful, but it's not. like time, open bracket, salary plus rates, close bracket plus material. It's a pretty simple formula. And then using that, would that then be your minimum, i.e. what the wholesale price is?
Yeah, so that is my absolute minimum. So if it doesn't matter who sells the work, I have to make that as a minimum. So if I am selling through a gallery, I need to make sure whatever they're pricing my work at, that I'm still taking away that as a minimum, because that's covering all my expenses and my time to create it. And if you're doing that, that's you being paid fairly for your work. So I would then generally, I know that some artists might choose to multiply that whole figure to work out the retail price, which is a price the customer's buying it for. They might multiply that by 2.4, which is about, that allows someone to take a 60% commission. Now, I don't sell through many places at all, because they're very few and far between that would take 60% commission. So I sort of feel I multiply mine by 2. So I'm just doubling that price. And then that way, if I do sell through somewhere that takes a 60% commission, because most of the time most places take 40% commission, they offset each other. So I just get that. So that formula that you had said, where you've got your salary and running costs and you're multiplying that by your time and you're adding on your materials, that is the minimum I need to make. So I then double that, and that is my retail price. So if a gallery sells it, they're selling it for that doubled price, that retail price. If I'm selling it, I would also sell it for that retail price. But what that means is that when I'm selling it myself, I'm selling it for more than I need to make. So I view that as being a selling bonus. So that's how, in my head, I feel more comfortable with gallery commission rates, is that extra, that double is the bonus for whoever sells that.
It's very useful.
It's really useful, because I know there's a lot of, as I said before, my background's in engineering and mathematics, so this kind of makes a lot more sense to me. I budget and price a lot of projects in my day-to-day, whereas I know when you started, both in your furniture and then in the book, it was a real bugbear for you.
Where do you start?
Yeah. I think it's a really, really simple, laid out formula to complicate something that actually is doing a lot of demystification, because there's a lot of, maybe anxiety is the wrong word, but there's a lot of anxiety around pricing artwork, and it seems to be what a lot of people do is look at what else is out there on the market and then price similar. That seems to be the standard, doesn't it?
Rather than looking at actually what your costs are, because everyone's different, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's get their materials from different places or different countries, or, so it might take somebody less time to do something. Rather, it's just, you need to do it based on your own,
Yeah, what you're offering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do find, I find the Scottish Artists Union rates to be really helpful, because they've got different rates depending on how much experience you have. And I find that useful because, someone with less experience is likely to take longer to produce something, but they can't really sell their work a lot more expensive than someone with more experience, so it does actually balance itself out quite well in how the work is then priced for selling and for someone buying it. But it's important that you know your value as an artist and you're placing that value on your work. Because if you don't value your work well, then how can you expect your customer to value it in the same way? If you're selling your work cheaply, the customer's not going to necessarily care about your work as much as if they actually spent a good amount of money on it. But it is, and I have seen it. I don't think it has a detrimental effect on sales either. When I first started, I think I wasn't sure on pricing, so I was looking at how everyone else was pricing their work. So I went into a printmakers, Edinburgh printmakers, and I looked through their browsers at how much things were selling for, and thought, well, those artists have a lot more experience, so I'll half the price, and that's how much I'll price mine. And actually, yeah, I sold some of it, but then I quickly realised I was pricing wrong, and I put my prices up, and actually it did not impact my sales. Putting my prices up, if anything, I was selling a wee bit more. So, it doesn't mean that you're putting your prices up and then you're not selling as much. It's actually it's not a bad thing to put your prices up. You're just valuing yourself and your time and ensuring that actually you can make a living off your work,
which is the most important thing, because otherwise you won't be there.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to what you said, that putting your prices up doesn't mean you're going to sell less. We're all programmed at the moment with this race to the bottom, cheapest, because that's kind of what's out there, isn't it? You look at your Amazons, and you look at all your e-commerce and drop shipping, and a lot of the less qualified advice, I'll say, is make it cheaper and it'll sell more than the next person. But there's no value in being the cheapest or the second cheapest. It's the value you want to add, especially in this space, because ultimately people are buying into you, aren't they? They're buying into your prints and your stuff, and what they want to see is that you're qualified to charge that price. It goes for anyone, it goes for Tim making pens out in Atlanta, it goes for Zoe carving stone. People are buying into them, and people want to know that they are worth the value that they are charging.
Even Zoe has said before, sometimes I'm too scared to put my time into it because it would just be, it would just cost too much. So, But
then you wonder, especially someone like Zoe that's doing amazing, unique one-off pieces. I know a lot of people are doing unique one-off pieces, but hers are they've only got a place in really high-end places. And you wonder, if she did just put our prices right up, i.e. this is exactly what it does cost me based on the, say £36 an hour for the Scottish Artists Union, would it still sell? If it would still sell, and she's making more out of it and being paid more fairly for it, is that not a better scenario? Ultimately, we're all looking for that point on the bell curve where number of sales versus amount of income doesn't change, right? That's what we're all looking for.
Yeah. But then, having said that, I would say, you're talking about, having this sort of race to the bottom and having work that's priced cheaper. And I would say that it's important to have work at different price points. And that's one of the things that I realised early on, is that to start with, I was just producing these really big prints. But not everyone can afford a really big print. So however you want as many customers as possible, because you need to be able to support yourself. And those big prints, the sales of those might be few and far between. So it's how do you make money in between those sales? So it's important to have sort of different pricing tiers for your work. So, I introduced early on, I started introducing greetings cards, which are £2.50. Everyone can afford a greetings card, so if they can't afford the print, they're buying a card from me instead. I then produced, it was actually when my youngest was a baby, and I was really struggling to produce a print very quickly. I was only getting a few hours guaranteed in a day, and that was it. So I started to challenge myself, right, I'm going to produce a whole print in a day, I'm going to cut it and, get straight through to my first print of it in the time that he's asleep. So I started creating these mini open edition prints, and they were a lot cheaper, just £15 for a tiny print. and they started selling like hotcakes. You know, it was just sort of one of these. It didn't stop people buying the bigger prints if they could afford it, but people that couldn't buy the bigger prints that still wanted to support me as an artist or wanted my work, they'd buy a smaller print instead. So straight away, it increased my audience and it increased my customer base. So it is important to have that work. And I would always say, you know, have impulse purchases. And impulse purchases I would view as really being work that's under £20-25. Something which someone is not going to think twice before they buy it. You know, they're not actually going to think about it. They're just going to see it and want it and just buy it. Have work that's sort of mid-range. So you'll be looking at from between £25 to £100 and £150. They might think a bit more about buying it, but it's still, you know, it's still a bit more affordable. You know, it's something that they might think, but, you know, it's not out of reach necessarily for them to buy it. But then you've got your statement pieces, which are a lot more expensive. And your statement pieces are, you know, they're work that probably take longer to produce. There's something really special about them. So those won't sell as quickly necessarily as your smaller pieces. So your smaller pieces are your bread and butter. That keeps you going in between all the bigger sales. But those statement pieces also help to sell the smaller pieces. But also people will want the statement pieces. They will aspire in a way to have them. You know, they'll be saving up for them, or, you know, so it is about having work at different price points, and then it's knowing the best platforms to sell that different work on. So your impulse purchases you can easily sell on Etsy, through shops or cafes, on your website. You know, that's the sort of place that you'll sell the smaller, cheaper pieces. Your mid-range pieces, you know, where you're looking at £25 to a couple of £100, you know, you've got Not on the High Street, Art Finder, galleries, your website, Folksy, you know, that type of platform. And then you've got your statement pieces, which, you know, are really, again, your website, you can sell anything pretty much. But galleries, Saatchi Art, Art Finder, Not on the High Street, you know, these sort of more higher end online platforms and galleries. And, you know, it is just knowing what type of work sells better in what locations.
And would you withdraw work from certain locations? Would you specifically keep your statement pieces out of Etsy, or would you just put them up there anyway?
I keep them out of Etsy. I do, and in fact, I don't have Etsy anymore. I don't have Etsy anymore. I gave up on Etsy. But no, early on, I realised my statement pieces weren't really selling that well on Etsy. And also, I wanted to be selling them through galleries. And if I'm selling them on galleries, I just sort of felt like they were two very different audiences and platforms. And I just didn't feel that, you know, when I've got a real quality piece that I'm wanting to push to a sort of more, a more discerning audience, in a way that actually that was who I wanted to see it. And Etsy, you not necessarily got that customer, you know, and so Etsy, I just cut back. So it was just the impulse. It was and, you know, I had a few enamel pins made, but, you know, with some of my designs on, but it was sort of my greetings cards, pencil cases, you know, I've done textile printing on pencil cases, my notebooks, and, you know, it was just smaller open edition prints. And that was what I kept on Etsy. And then my larger pieces, my larger prints are what I sell through galleries. And then my website was just everything on my website. But the more type of platforms, different types of platforms you tap into, the wider your audience is, the wider your reach is. But it's knowing what's the type of work that sells better on those platforms, and putting your work into the right platforms. And just making sure that, you know, you want to have as big an audience as possible, because the more people you have to sell your work to, the more quantity, the more volume you're going to sell, and the more money you make.
Yeah.
Really.
And the more eyes on your products, I suppose.
That's exactly it. It's, you know, I won't use the word I know we have a good product at We Are Makers. I'm very sure we have a good product at We Are Makers. We're just at a point where we need more eyes on. And ultimately that is a placement and a time thing, isn't it? That's just outlasting things. That's just sticking at it for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, yeah. And as I say as well, you know, when we're talking about the wholesale price and the retail price, you know, and that sort of minimum price you need to make, and then the price that it's selling for, you know, any fees on these platforms will be covered by that sort of 50, that difference, you know, when you're doubling up your pricing. So that will cover your fees. And then through my own website, I just offer free postage across the board, because I know, you know, my postage is going to be covered in that additional cost. So there's no reason not to offer free postage. So, and then also, you know, open exhibitions and that type of thing. Often these things have application fees attached to them, or if I'm having to post work to an exhibition through an art couriers are expensive. You know, I've just had someone send my work down to Bankside in London because I can't actually get there on that particular day for hand-in, and it's £65. So I'm posting it to the art courier, but they're doing the hand-in for me, and it's £65 just to hand it into the gallery. But I know that over the course of the year, through that sort of extra difference that I'm making above my wholesale price, that can cover those fees. So I'm not having to worry about that. So yeah, so it acts as a good buffer, and it's a good thing as well to use that. For myself personally, I view that as good for reinvesting in myself and my business and my development. So I can use, you know, I don't worry about paying to do a workshop with someone, or, you know, some other form of professional development, or getting advice from someone, or mentoring. You know, I think that, you know, all artists, I mean, I mentor emerging artists, but, you know, I think everyone at whatever stage I had mentoring last year, you know, 15 years into my practice. But it was brilliant, because it gave me a time to just, you know, talk through my work and where I saw my work going, and just really channel my thinking. And, you know, so, but paying for these, you know, it's, you can do that, and you can reinvest in yourself and your business if your pricing's right.
Yeah.
I like the way that, because certainly to my knowledge, I like the way that you've prioritised the wholesale price first and then times on top of it. Because oftentimes when you set out to be a maker, you set your own prices, don't you? And then that's what you sell them for. And then someone wholesale approaches you, and actually what you realise is that you're cutting your nose off to get into somewhere, because it ends up costing you to get into somewhere. And that's not, unfortunately, that is not uncommon from what we hear speaking to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's how I did it. The first time I priced my work, I was looking at people's retail prices, and it was, okay, that's the retail price. That's the retail price I'm putting on my work. And then I sold through a couple of galleries and realised, actually, you know, I'm probably not earning enough money from doing it this way. So it's about knowing your minimum, and that is one of the most important things, because that should be the foundation for all your pricing. And I would recommend as well, even if you're not selling through a gallery, to still double your pricing, because at some point in future, if you decide to sell through a gallery, you don't want to be doing a sudden jump, you know. But also that extra that you're making can help to pay for other things, to help you develop, to then start selling through a gallery. You know, it's all about professional development and really making sure that what you are creating is the best that you can create. So
No, it's been really helpful.
That's really, really helpful. Yeah, really helpful. Both the gallery side and the pricing side, I think, has been really helpful. If you were to wrap all of that up into, maybe quite a difficult question to answer, if you were to wrap all of that up into a statement or a couple of lines for people to kind of bear in mind when pricing art, what would it be?
I do have some takeaways, if that helps. A few takeaways with that. So you want to make sure you've got a clear wholesale price and retail price. And to do that, you need to make sure you are familiar with all your running costs. And that includes your admin time as well, because often people forget the time they spend on admin, but that needs to be paid for somehow. Implement pricing tiers in your work. Make sure your pricing is laid out in writing. And lastly, have a good sales strategy across a variety of platforms.
It's always a hard one, I think.
Yeah, it is a difficult one. But I think, as you say, if you set different products to different platforms, it kind of helps that all happen, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I find as well, I mean, I've managed to integrate. So I've got my Instagram, I've got a Shopify website. So my Instagram is integrated with Shopify and Facebook. So I just need to post something on Instagram, it automatically posts it to Facebook. Both of them send people directly to my website. So there are ways to make these things easier to get your work out there, because one of the things that we all struggle with is having enough time to do everything. And I think that's one of the things that people that aren't self-employed don't appreciate, is actually someone self-employed has to have so many different hats. They're doing everything themselves. And so it's important to be efficient with time as much as possible. And one of these things that you can try and make easier is to make sure that that things are as integrated as possible, so it's easier to just do things at the click of a button. Yeah. And the other thing, actually, from looking back at the gallery side, is your website, making sure you've got a good website and good photos to sell yourself.
I think a website is always in development. I don't know how many times we've changed our website. Or changed the server that we're using. Now we're on Shopify as well, which is fantastic, I have to say.
What was the book we can recommend everyone again that we rebuilt our website on last time? So we rebuilt a Shopify website for subscriptions, because now we're offering quarterly subscription. There is a fantastic book that we've been telling everyone about, and I'm going to use this as another opportunity to tell everyone about, because I think it's Building a Brand Story by Donald Miller.
Yeah.
And Kate found it.
Yeah, it's clarify your message so customers will listen. And there's so many books out there that tell you do this and it shall work, sort of thing. And I'm always a bit skeptical, yeah, on these sort of things. I'm thinking, should I not? But actually, it's the best book I've ever
It's very good. It's very good. And actually, we were having a conversation with, who was the girl at one of Nikki's events? We were having a conversation with someone who's in marketing, and mentioned that book, and her eyes lit up, and she attests to how good it is as well, which can only be a good thing, right?
Because we did our website, we
done our website through it, and it's I thought we'd cut all of the additional gumph out of our website and made it super clear what we do, and actually we probably cut another 90% out of it.
Yeah.
And as a result, sales are up.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing, and you might find this with being a gallery, because you'll be exhibiting so much different stuff. It's one thing, we can all, what was it Paul Hamler said to us? You can do anything, you can't do everything.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to add value by saying, and I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this. But actually, I think a lot of the value comes in and just being like, no, I do this, but I do this well.
Yeah. I did a session. I was mentoring someone over the past 6 months, and we did a goal setting session last week, and we did a bit of time management in that, and I just said, is this something that you have to do, or can someone else do this for you? And it's about prioritizing your time by doing the jobs that only you can do. And pass on whatever you can to someone else if you can. So it's like with myself, I do so I'm a printmaker, but I also print on textiles, and I do bookbinding as well, and print my own covers. And I started getting my eldest daughter to fold all my sheets of paper for me, because I'm having to fold like 500 sheets of paper at a time in half, and I'm just like one by one. So I started paying my 15-year-old, right, you can fold this paper, and it just frees up that time for me to do something else that only I can do. So.
Yep. Is there anything else you want to touch on while we've got you here, Sarah?
I don't think so. I think that's everything. I'm just looking at the notes that I made before this, but I think we've covered everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been really useful. I think there'll be a lot of people that take some comfort in, there is resources out there to help you price your stuff, but also that it is not the person listening that has the only problem in it. Like, it is quite a widely found problem, is pricing your stuff.
Yeah.
But like we've said here, there is ways around it. So to run back one last time, I'm just going to read through the little example you've got here. Your time, I was going to, until my PC, there it is, PC went into sleep there. It is time, open bracket, salary plus running costs, close bracket, plus materials. So to run through Sarah's resource here, it is, I worked 5 times 6 hour days. My running cost over the year is £2.50 an hour. My hourly rate is £36 an hour. That's the thing we can find from a Scottish Artists Union, or maybe even just asking around. My material costs were £30, and I produced a limited edition of 20 prints. My wholesale price is $59.25. How do we get to that $59.25? You have your 30 hours of time, 5 times 6 hour days, your £36 plus your £2.50 per hour for the running costs. Multiply that by your 30 hours for your 6 days, plus your £30 for your materials, is £1,185 divided by the 20 prints you've done. Brings you to £59.25 per print. And that, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, would be your wholesale price. Anything
so that's my wholesale price, yeah. And that's something that I hadn't actually mentioned. So because I do limited edition prints, that after I've worked out that what we'd discussed before, I then divide that by how many prints I've got. So the time to produce my print is for the whole edition, but then I just divide that to work out my limited edition run, which doesn't apply to makers that aren't doing limited editions and sort of working out their pricing and things in bulk and then having to split it between prints. But
yeah. And equally for makers that are doing one of one, your time would just be your time to make one. You wouldn't do a division, would you? So
yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah. Very useful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
right.
Kate, have you got any other questions for Sarah?
No, it's been very insightful. It's so simple really when you've got it written down and you understand it. And, I think your free resources was great. So thanks for sharing it with us.
That's all right.
Because a lot of people don't know these things right there. They'll spend hours on Google and be like, I just want to find somewhere that somebody can just show me.
Yeah, there's
simply.
so many people telling you how to do stuff online now, but who's actually telling you right? Which is exactly why we're trying to do this. So Sarah, where do people go to find out more about yourself and your resources?
Okay, so people can go to, I'm on Instagram at Sarah Makes Prints. I'm also, my website is www.sarahstewartprintmaker.co.uk. On my website, there is an artist resource section where you can find my price and notes. And that is it's just an image. Click on the image and it's a PDF file. And that gives you my notes and pricing, and that is a free resource. So just feel free to use that.
Perfect. Well, we appreciate your time as well.
Okay.
It's been fantastic. Yes. Thank you ever so much. Good luck with everything, renovations and everything else going on in the gallery. Do you have any up and coming gallery stuff you want to let people know about?
Not a lot. We've got Wigtown Book Festival coming this weekend for a week, so it's going to be an absolutely manic 10 days in the gallery. I think the book festival normally has about 15,000 visitors over the course of 10 days. So it is our busiest week of the year, so I'm just getting ready for that just now.
Well, thank you very much for fitting us in on a busy week. Where do people find out more about the gallery, Sarah?
So that will be craigardgallery.co.uk, or we're just Craigard Gallery on Instagram. Craigard is Craigard. So it's named after our house. Our house is called Craigard.
Nice.
There you are. Perfect. Sarah, thank you so much. Yeah. I'm going to wrap it up at that. And very insightful. I look forward to getting it out end of this week, early next week, and seeing what people think.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Fabulous.
Nice to talk with you.
Yeah.
Lovely. Cheers, pal. Bye.
Take care.